I'm Quentin Clark. I'm the Director of Program Management for the WinFS team at Microsoft. My job mostly involves making sure that the design and architecture, customer input, and fitting into the rest of WinFX and the rest of Longhorn for WinFS comes together correctly. WinFS is one of the three key pillars of the new WinFX platform. Those pillars again are Indigo, Avalon, and WinFS. WinFS provides a fundamental set of new storage capabilities that are part of this new managed code platform. To start with, you look at the industry and the trends around data. One of them is about how much data there is and the fact that more and more digital information is being born every day. When you look at things like ordering holiday gifts, you don't go to LL Bean catalogs and go to the middle insert section anymore and fill out a form, but instead you go to a website and you fill things out electronically. That's creating digital information from the beginning. The advent of the internet and business-to-business transaction processing has just boomed the amount of digital information existing in enterprises today. In the consumer space, things like digital photography and digital video are exploding how much information is coming in on consumer systems. So this explosion of digital information is just happening. Organizing that information is becoming this huge problem. According to some industry reports, knowledge workers even are spending up to hours a day looking for information, trying to find the thing they know exists, and in some cases just recreating things that already are out there because they have no way of really finding it. I'm sure many people in the technical community have had the experience of having some less technical relative or friend ask them, hey, you know, I found this thing on the internet that I saw a few months ago, and I barely remember anything about it, but I went to a search site and I found it instantly. But I saved this document to my hard drive 2 days ago and I can't seem to locate it. And in the trends that are supporting solving these problems are, of course, storage capacity as a whole. The industry in disk storage space has been exceeding Moore's law, and in fact, when we ship Longhorn, we're expecting to have a few hundred to half a terabyte to even terabyte disk size on a standard desktop PC that you would buy. And WinFS, of course, is the other major technology trend that's going to support solving this new storage problem, this growing storage problem. The user benefits around WinFS are find, relate, and act. Finding is relatively easy. You understood the example I gave you around finding something in your hard drive. Well, the ability to say, this is my world, this is everything I've seen, this is every place I've been, this is all the pictures I've taken, this is all the documents I've created, these are all the people I've interacted with and how and when, and be able to really do deep kinds of searches, including join kinds of searches across that data, is an incredible opportunity to really improve productivity for everybody. Relaying things is also similarly very important and also contributes to the find. If I tell you that there's a meeting tomorrow, you know, for example, that you should worry about things like where's the meeting, how long is it, who's there, what's the topic, what are the associated documents, where are the meeting notes afterwards, etc. Whereas a computer has no notion about any of these things, much less in a very centralized way that the Windows platform provides. Well, allowing you to relate things together, the meeting notes to the document, this video to the calendar appointment where you decide you're going to spend some time watching it, is a huge opportunity to understand more about data that can be native to the system now. And acting on information is also very important. For example, today some email systems give you the ability to say, when mail comes from this person or that person, I want to do this thing with it. I want to raise its priority, I want to put it in this particular folder organization, I want to maybe send me a message to my cell phone letting me know that I got this important response. But imagine being able to do that with all your information. Every photograph that comes in, every business-to-business document that comes in, every piece of work that a knowledge worker is working on. You can apply these end-user customizable rules that help you sort through and sift and prioritize all your information. Developers are also going to get enormous benefits out of this platform. And we're taking very much a crawl, walk, run approach to how those benefits can be gained. And at the first step, WinFS provides a platform that's completely compatible with the existing file system. So if you have a file type today, a document, a photograph type, a media type, whatever, you can store inside WinFS and get these benefits around finding, relating, and acting just from the get-go without any even changes. If you have a specialized type that doesn't use a standard like OLE doc properties or JPEGs or MP3s, etc., then you can write a piece of code that helps us interpret what's inside your file to make it more findable, more relatable, more actable by end users. The next step you can take, of course, is to really adopt the WinFS principles, the data model principles, the schemas that are inside Windows now. So you can write some code in your application, take advantage of the fact that Windows now knows about contacts, or about locations, or about documents. And you can leverage those new types and integrate things in your application that weren't previously possible. The third step you can take is to schematize your data using the WinFS data model. So you can do things like, instead of just having this big monolithic file type, I'm going to break my data down into the smaller granular schematized units that are inside that file and allow people to interact with those more highly grained units. That's an important aspect to WinFS, the ability for developers to create their own schemas that can then participate and act in this whole new rich data set world. For the next segment, let me go to the whiteboard and start drawing out the architecture of how WinFS is put together, and even go through and explain how these things are connected, what they do, and even give you a couple of code samples and how it will be used. Okay, so let me begin by drawing from the bottom up how WinFS is put together. At the very bottom of everything is the existing NT file system, or NTFS, as I'll write it here. This subsystem provides us the ability to ensure that we have compatibility with existing file systems. Developers today are using APIs in Win32 like create file or find first, find next. And when you use those APIs, those have to work and they have to behave in the same exact manner that you expect them to behave previously, so that all existing applications that are built for Windows continue to work. In fact, we have to use the NTFS subsystem so that streaming support and file handle support works exactly the same as it does today. On top of that, we've taken some relational technology. I'll just call it RE here for abbreviation, relational engine. We've taken relational technology that we share with the MS SQL product, and we're using it on top of NTFS to provide us the core relational engine that WinFS is built around. On top of that relational engine, we have the data model. Data models is the significant part of WinFS. At the bottom of this, there's something called items. So items are the fundamental new atomic unit you now work with when you're dealing with data inside Windows. Think of it as the new file. An item can be a thing like a contact or a document or an appointment or a location or a task. It can be any variety of different things, a particular piece of financial data, a request for proposal. There's all sorts of different things that an item can be. But an item is the thing that gets copied, gets moved, you can serialize it, you instantiate into an object, into a managed code object, and you program against it. It's a new atomic unit you deal with. It's the thing you synchronize. It's the thing that you directly interact with and, in fact, relate to one another. So I have another piece here called relationships, which I can't fit in the box I drew, but you'll forgive me that, of course. But relationships are the next data model aspect that you build on top of. So I can relate, for example, a calendar item to a document that was reviewed at that meeting, or I can relate a contact to a photograph that contact is in. And this relationship model and the fact that you can relate things together is built in way deep down inside the data model inside WinFS. On top of this, we have something called extensions, which I suspect won't also fit into the box I drew. Extensions are how you can supplement the data model without having to necessarily create whole new types. So I could take something like a contact, and a contact might define things like a name, which could be complex, could have surnames, first names, etc. Could have something like an address, which could also be complex, street, city, state, etc. And can have a whole bunch of other data. Well, if I'm an application that's tracking, say, store sales or something at a clothing store, I might create an extension to contact, which keeps track of, so my store extensions, which keeps track of things like favorite color or monthly budget they spend on clothes. So I can sit here as a developer and I can say, geez, I love this WinFS concept, this WinFX concept of contact, but I need to have some context have additional data associated to it. And you can do that through this mechanism called extensions. Additionally, you'll be able to add your own behaviors and methods to the items that are defined inside WinFS, whether they're Windows items like contact will be, whether they're ISV items that you'll be defining. Next, the data model. Are basic operations of the store itself. So we have operations, and I'll also draw file system services here as well. Operations are things like backing something up or restoring an item. They're things like serialize an item out, or copy an item from one store to another, or change how some of the data is organized. A base set of capabilities that are built into WinFS so that you as a developer can then manipulate the data more easily. But these are fairly low-level kinds of operations. On top, we'll draw a set of APIs in a minute that'll explain how you primarily will interact with the data that's inside WinFS. File system services provides a important aspect of WinFS as it relates to NTFS. It allows you to define how data in WinFS and the underlying file streams that might be backing that data in WinFS are related to each other. So let me draw a little example here. If I have a document, and I'll just use a Word 97 document as an example, something that's clearly built on a pre-Longhorn system. That Word 97 document is in fact an OLE doc compatible document. So it has a part of it which defines things like a title or an author or a summary. Okay. And it also has the main body of the document. Dear developers. Okay, so this document, this is how it exists today. This is the structure of it today, effectively, on the existing file system. In WinFS, we define something called the document type. Document type. Okay, and this document type has things like a title property, and it has things like an author relationship. Okay, and this author relationship connects you to a contact. The author relationship actually points to a WinFS contact item. So before I described what the contact item might comprise of, a name structure, an address structure, etc. And we take author and we actually make it into a relationship so that you can do things like show me all the documents created by some particular contact I have. And as you explore and work with contacts in Windows, you can do these interesting kinds of queries like show me the pictures they're in or the documents they've authored and the meetings they've been to. So that becomes a relationship. Other things like summary become just standard fields. And we also have this notion of a file stream part to this document type that points down literally to an NTFS stream that contains the binary file stream that you expect when you're looking at it in the existing file system today. So what WinFS does, when you take a document and you then import it into WinFS using one of its operations, is we take this stream, we put it down into this file stream structure, we create a document item, we create this contact item or reference an existing contact item, and then know how to take the various properties that we find and create the right structures out of them. So there's a piece of code here that's doing all this mapping, if you will. It's deciding where to look inside this Word document and how to populate the item type called document, how to populate a contact, where to put the stream, etc. This is called a metadata handler. And metadata handlers allow you to provide this ability to take stuff that's in existing files today and do the right job populating highly structured, rich schemas in WinFS. Similarly, they also allow you to take changes to the structured data inside WinFS and put them back inside the file stream. This is very important. So you can do things like program to the set of documents that you may have in WinFS and change the title of some document. And in fact, it will be reflected back down inside the file stream so that when a legacy application that's coming through the Win32 APIs reopens that file, it has the right data inside it. So this is called metadata handlers. This is what the file system services does down in this part of WinFS. And in fact, it's very important to the whole story. We're going to ship Windows with a set of these metadata handlers for standard file types, early doc properties, JPEGs, media types, etc. But you as a developer will be able to write your own for the kinds of custom file formats that you have. So moving up in the stack a little bit, there's another set of system services that we provide as part of WinFS, building on top of all these core parts of WinFS. One of them is called synchronization, and one of them is called InfoAgent. Synchronization, we're building in from the ground up. We think it opens up a whole new set of possibilities for developers. Imagine being able to build a distributed application, not having to really think much distributed. To just say, geez, I know I have WinFS stores on either side. I'm deploying this application out to desktops. I'm going to write my application in such a way that it recognizes changes that are incoming and also instantiates changes to be synchronized to other machines. One of the demonstrations we provided the PDC was around this engineering application. The engineering application is built around synchronization and, in fact, notifications to allow the end users to go off and do things like go to a site meeting or go to a meeting with a client to take notes about something, some engineering plans. Those engineering plans get synchronized automatically when they get back to their corporate environment. The engineers working on that project then picked up on those changes and made the appropriate changes to their engineering plans. They built this whole application around this kind of engineering workflow. And that's very possible now because synchronization just can happen. In fact, down in the schemas themselves, you can define how you want things to be synchronized. You can make a decision, for example, down here in this contact example I could say, I want the entire name to be a granular change in it. Don't change the first name without changing the last name, for example. I mean, if someone's going to make a change to a name, they make a change to the whole name. But down inside the address, I might say, well, people can change zip codes all the time because that's kind of what happens. So, should I allow you to more granularly define that I can allow these things to change independently of each other? And what you get out of that is the ability to say, if I have two items that have changed on two different machines, but what's inside those changes is not conflicting because one person changed a name, another person changed an address, then I can merge these changes back in very cleanly. In fact, you define that up in the schemas as you define items. We'll have defined all this, of course, for all the Windows types. So sync can just happen. It's now just a platform service that just gives you these capabilities right out of the box. InfoAgent provides you the ability to act on changes. In the whole Find Relay Act story, it's really InfoAgent that finishes up this whole picture. It allows an end user and a developer to say things like, for this type, for this result set, you might say, whether it's in this folder, whether it meets some particular criteria, I want to take this action based on this context. The easiest example to talk about with InfoAgent is something like not having the MS Messenger pop-ups appear when you're in presentation mode in a PowerPoint. And that's a kind of a data change notification, rules and actions kind of thing, where that rule's written like, if I get this notification that someone's come online or I get a new piece of mail, but my context, my environment is that I'm in full screen mode, then do nothing. Otherwise, go ahead and put this pop-up as the action. So it allows end users to customize, and we believe that it'll really allow end users to deal with the huge influx of information that they're dealing with every day. Also built on top here, of course, is schemas themselves in the schema system. And we'll have window schemas, and we'll have, for lack of a better word, developer schemas or your schemas or ISV schemas. Window schemas include things like contacts or calendar items or tasks or locations or documents or media types. It's pretty much we're targeting the things that end users have to deal with every day and trying to get a good enough breadth there so that a variety of different applications can be built to enhance the lives of everyday users, whether knowledge workers or consumers. Developers are going to provide, you're going to provide a whole set of new schemas in the system. Financial data, business transaction data, requests for proposals. The example I gave here about a clothing store wanting to add to contacts around some of their purchase behavior of their clients. In the consumer space, there's a ton of stuff that can be done around digital photography and messaging schemas and what we kind of call personal memories and the management of personal memories. So not only are people going to extend these things, but they're going to fundamentally build whole new ones, new classes of data that Windows isn't going to provide. When you do that, when you do define your own schemas, you get all the abilities and advantages of WinFS. You get synchronization, you get info agent, you get the extensions and the relationships and the whole data model and the whole power of all the operations underneath it as well. Built on top of this, of course, is the most important piece, which are the APIs themselves. And when we look at WinFS and the API capabilities, we kind of look at it through three lenses. One is through objects. And objects allow you to do things like program to a contact or a document in a very managed code .NET and WinFX friendly way. So let me give you an example of that. I might dim P as a person, and person's now a defined Windows type, and I could say for each P in person dot find all, and then I'm going to give it a context, which I'll explain in a second, and then a query, which I think would be personal names, which is this complex name structure I talked about before, dot surname, which is a particular property within that complex structure, equals, and then Smith. Okay, and then I can go to next. So what I've done here is I've said, geez, I'm going to instantiate a new person object, and then I'm going to issue this query that looks for surnames where the surname is Smith across this context. And the context is something that I've defined previously in this code. The context basically just says a store, a WinFS store where you create data. We're looking at ways to simplify this so that this can be just intuited automatically when you start to program against WinFS. That's an example. You get this rich object, and then you can do things with this object like, p.personalnames.surname, and set that to something else. Set it to Jones if they got married and changed their last name, for example. So that's objects, and that's everything you'd expect it to be. And there's a whole class library and everything else you can find now up on MSDN around the Longhorn WinFX SDK. The next way we look at this is through XML. Okay, and I will be able to take any item that's in WinFS and ask for an XML representation of it, or ask for the XSD that would reflect the XML representation of it. When you define schemas in WinFS, we'll also produce for you the XSD that will go along with a representation of every item that could be in that shape through XML. This is going to enable great scenarios like I should be able to look inside WinFS, do a complex query, get some data results back, create XML out of them, then send them over Indigo for some business-to-business interoperability or some application connectivity that you're working on. This functionality is not in Longhorn bits today, but it's something that we're working hard on over the next few months. The last way we look at API programming to WinFS is through just T-SQL, standard relational language technology. And T-SQL functionality is very important, even though it's read-only. So you can't issue update statements, but you can issue all the select statements that you want. It's very important that we have T-SQL capabilities so that you're really leveraging the power of the relational engine that's down deep inside WinFS. In fact, is the core of how the data model and how the model is built around this new storage system. So let me give you a quick example of what this similar kind of thing might look like in T-SQL. Of course, you start with the ubiquitous select statement. So I'm going to select p underscore item from, and then I got to navigate to namespace inside SQL system.storage dot context store dot, and then look for person table where, and then I'll keep going down here, exists, and I'm going to issue this select statement for which particular people I want, star from unnest. I'll explain that operation in a second. p.personal names and where, and dot surname equals Smith. Okay, and you can go back and compare this to my original object operations on the same thing, and you'll find that I'm getting basically the same result. The thing that's really unique here is that I'm looking at a person's table, and I'm selecting from unnest, and that takes this complex structure of personal names that I described before in the context schema, and picks out just the surname, compares that to Smith, and then results back all the person's P that satisfy that criteria. So you can see I also have this T-SQL example. And imagine harnessing the power of the T-SQL language and query capabilities in order to do very complex kinds of joins, discovering how data might be related to each other beyond just using the object model. So this gives you a whole new set of capabilities. And you'll be able to, of course, through the managed code interfaces into WinFS, issue T-SQL statements and get back the objects that you'd expect back and continue to program them just in managed code. So this gives you a fairly wide overview of what WinFS is and how it's built. To highlight the things I think are the most important are, first of all, the fact that we're married together the relational engine and the file system that exists today. So we're able to do things like give this complex structure or issue these complex queries, but also preserve compatibility with the existing file system for all the applications that have been built today. The data model, and around items especially. Items are the new thing. You got to think about how you want to have items defined for the kinds of data that you're working with in your applications. You define that through schema, and then you get this rich set of operations around synchronization and info agent operations and file system services if you need those. And then a fairly broad set of API capabilities allow you to interact with all the data that's now inside WinFS. The last thing I'll go through is just to describe briefly where the extensibility points into this whole system will be. And for that, I'll choose one more color. So, in no particular order, one is through these file system services, so that you can allow WinFS to deeply understand your existing file types. And you do that through these metadata handlers. You can write these metadata handlers. Another is through building extensions to say, geez, I want to be able to not only interact with the types that are in Windows, but I need to really add a little bit of data to make my application understand those things better or make that whole data item richer. 3 is through defining your own schemas, the ability to create your own entire data types that can then participate in this very, very rich world. 4 will be synchronization. Synchronization will have a few places that you can then extend. One will be around, of course, building synchronization adapters to the storage that you may already have. Lots of enterprises have other kinds of storage systems, data in mainframes, etc. And WinFS synchronization allows you to build your own synchronization adapter to take data from these other systems and bring them into WinFS. And those can, of course, be one-directional for read-only data, or even bi-directional, so you can allow people to change the data inside WinFS and synchronize those things back out into those back-end systems. The other way the synchronization will allow you to extend is through the ability to add your own custom conflict resolution handlers. This is for cases where if you define a piece of schema and you say, geez, even within this granular change unit, if these two pieces of data conflict, I'm going to write a piece of code that allows me to intelligently unconflict them or resolve those conflicts. Without having to pop up a piece of UI or author interesting policy like last writer wins. You can actually do something a little bit more intelligent there. Info agent is another place you'll be able to add quite a bit of extensibility. You'll be able to author rules. As a developer, you need to really think, how is my data going to be exposed, and how my end users want to customize how they want that data interacted with. It's very important to think that through. So for example, if I'm MS Messenger, I'm going to really think, wow, I want to be able to allow the end user to control when pop-ups come up and down based on the context they're in. Or if I'm a personal information manager, I want to be able to say things like, geez, I really like to be able to allow my end users to contextually understand an incoming message's priority, where they might be, and set up things like a meeting appointment to get back to somebody if they're away at a meeting. So there's a variety of different ways that you might think about end users doing your things, but what's important is that you think about, are you exposing the right capabilities to allow them to understand the context and the data that's coming in and provide the right actions for them to take? And second of all, what are the rules that you could define so your application could take advantage of this to make your application richer? And these are the primary ways that you'll be able to extend the system through those 5 things. There's a last one up here, which is about the shell itself. And I haven't talked much about the Windows shell, the new user experience as part of Longhorn. But fundamental to WinFS and to its success in Longhorn is not just that we have this new storage system, but that the entire user experience is changing pretty dramatically in order to take advantage of that new system. So instead of just files and folders, we think of these libraries of different data types and how you can dynamically explore and stack and group based on the metadata that's inside those types of those items. You'll be able to, as a developer, you'll be able to extend that whole experience, provide your own tasks, your own ways of grouping, your own ways of sorting, and be able to take advantage of the fact that your data might be exposed in this new Longhorn user experience called the shell. And that's it. That pretty much describes WinFS in 15 minutes or less. Gives you a fairly broad overview of where we are with the architecture and where the APIs are and where you can extend.